Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? Well, what we're going to talk about today is something that I don't know if any of us ever thought about, okay? You know, most of us dread the dog days of summer. We look for relief by going in the pool with a cold glass of lemonade or sitting in front of the air conditioner. However, back in the year of 1816, the summer was different for those in the Northern Hemisphere, living in Northeastern America and in Northern Europe. They didn't have the warm summer weather they were accustomed to. In fact, there was no summer at all. And the results were so devastating for the people around the world. So what happened that year? Well, what can we learn from it? And how can we prepare for a climate catastrophe of this magnitude? And no, I'm not talking about climate change or anything like that. This actually happened, okay? So how could you actually survive a year without summer? And I know a lot of you are saying, well, thank God for that. Well, no, listen, okay? Located on the island of Sumbawa, and that's Sumbawa, it's in Indonesia, is Mount Tambora, and that's Tambora. It has been and currently is an active volcano. Now, on April 10th, 1815, Mount Tambora erupted, leaving 12 feet of ash over a 100-mile radius. And this is the largest volcanic eruption that has ever been recorded. All right. So it was 100 times larger than Mount St. Helens and was over 4 times stronger than Krakatoa. And that's Krakatoa. And it was larger than that eruption. So for 2 weeks, Mount Tambora spewed lava so violently that the smoke blocked the earth from the summer sunlight. And the result was a year without summer and the death of hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah. So could you survive the initial blast? Not if you were nearby it, no. If you were close to the volcano, you would have experienced a quick and violent passing. There simply was not enough time to run away. And farther out in the Asian region, many people also perished, but it was from hunger and starvation. So following the eruption of Tambora, the temperature in China dropped and the summer rice crop froze, which resulted in what? Famine. In Taiwan, they endured cold weather and snow, and people were so hungry that they were eating white clay to survive. And some parents went to the village market to sell their to sell their children, while others killed them so they would not suffer anymore. Okay? So this just goes to show you the extremes that people will actually go to out of fear and hunger and things like that. Okay, so, you know, this is why we prep. I get that. But I just want you to stick with me for just a little bit because I really need you to hear everything that I'm going to say to you, okay? So, in other areas of Asia, the explosion caused a drought and then flooded when the monsoon season began. With all of that flood water came a very rare and deadly strain of cholera. Consequently, by the end of the 1800s, millions perished from that disease. And then, listen to this, you know, I mean, could you just put your thinking caps on for 2 seconds, okay? Could you survive if you had been in Asia at that time? No, I mean, you might have had a chance if you were far away enough from the immediate explosion and then knew that you needed to move, and I mean fast, like lightning fast. I mean, once far enough away, however. Back in the 1800s, there was no way to test or even treat the cholera, and people would begin to have symptoms of like the flu, and they would never recover. So keep that in mind too. So with limited clean water, it is easy to see how the deadly strain was able to spread to others so fast. But nowadays, surviving an outbreak of cholera, or some other waterborne disease is less of a challenge. Why? Because we have easy access to portable and effective water filters, right? I mean, we've got Berkeys, we've got Life filters, we've got, name it, we got it, right on? So, and they're inexpensive enough to keep a second one on hand as a backup. And then we also have a third one. We have a fourth one. It's doable for most people. So then Northeastern America and Western Europe, they felt most of Mount Tambora, the wrath, the following year. The temperatures fluctuated, warm to freezing, warm to freezing, warm to freezing. It was like day or two, warm to freezing, warm to freezing. A hard frost was experienced every single month that same year. In some areas, up to 18 inches of snow fell in June. So June, what we're in right now, it fell in June. Small farm animals perished due to the exposure, and in Montreal, birds froze and they just dropped out of the sky. Yeah. It was difficult for the residents in that area to see this cold continue, and then when the warm days would come, people thought, oh, the worst was over. They began to start their gardens again. Then the fierce cold would just come back in with a vengeance and freeze all the plants again. Famine was inevitable. All right. So by August, things were starting to look up, or so they thought. There were warmer days. Farmers began planting crops again. They were hoping that they could grow something to harvest in October. Suddenly, and without warning, a strong cold storm hit the area again, followed by 2 days of freezing temperatures. And farmers, they wrapped their plants in rags, but the crops were still destroyed by the cold weather. As a result, the shortage of crops caused hoarding, and the price of produce tripled. Now, New Hampshire, the hay was 6 times its normal cost. The people who lived in the Northeast, they could not have imagined that the cold spell would last all winter. If they knew, they might have done something differently, So not only was the food scarce, but the food was available and prices were sky high. Now, back in 1816, one way to survive would have been to ration stored food, and this isn't as a bad strategy to consider now in modern times, right? But this is just one reason that preppers set goals of having 1 month extra food, 3 months extra food, 6 months, 1 year. Okay. But one other survival strategy would be knowing how to process livestock, storing the meat before the animals starved and died. It must have been devastating for farmers to watch their animals die that way without any way to preserve the meat long term. Now, knowing how to preserve food is vital survival skill to learn. Canning, dehydrating, even know how to salt meat or fish for preservation. All of these skills take time to learn, though. It's not something that you just learn overnight and say, okay, I'm good. No. You need supplies for the process, instruction manuals, and stuff like that, okay? Now, following the eruption of Mount Tambora, people living in the areas affected were counting on the food that they grew in the summer to get them through the winter, right? And these summer crops were preserved, and extra produce was either sold or used for bartering or exchanged with neighbors for other food. Well, during this cold summer, potatoes, rye, wheat were the only crops that were enduring this freeze. And due to extreme hunger, many people resorted to eating pigeons, raccoons, wild turnips, nettles, mackerel, hedgehogs. To survive, they ate foods they were not normally eating, it was not a part of their normal diet. And there are some remarkable stories that did come out of this tragedy. And one is about a small community of farmers that survived because one older farmer had 40 bushels of wheat stored up, and he chose to share his wheat with his neighbors. And those simple 40 bushels saved lives. After the man passed on, those that received the wheat put their money together, and they had a statue made in honor of this man. So when long-term food shortages happened and unusual food could be difficult to eat, you could try combining a familiar food with a new one. Replacing one type of veggie with another in a recipe can help make things palatable. Like the old farmer who shared his wheat, working together and sharing with those who you know, who you trust, who can help stretch current resources. Also, having a group of people with a variety of skills and ideas can help increase the chances of survival. Having your close-knit community, having your circle, okay? During that year without the summer, many people in New England decided to head west, not wanting to chance another bad year. They sold their farms for what they could, and they headed out to find a new area to settle down in. Some moved to Ohio, believing that they would have mild winters there, while others went to the Midwest. This migration helped establish what is known as the American Heartland. At the time, these decisions were made on limited information and knowledge. No one understood why they were not experiencing a warm summer. Their concern was that the cold summer weather would continue into the next year's planting season. Now, back in 1816, not knowing about the volcano and the weather patterns, people had to make a decision they felt was best for their survival. Like these days, we can go to NOAA, the website, NOAA, and learn about the weather in our area and around the world. We also have weather apps on our phones and weather radios to alert us of severe conditions. Unless the power grid was to fail over a broad area for a long time, the information we needed would be there to make rational decisions. Well, in 1816, many families lived in close proximity. They were dependent on each other to survive. And moving would have been a huge commitment with no guarantees. So I'm sure there were a lot of conversations among families and friends, what to do. Needs and circumstances were different for every family, of course. And learning how to communicate with others, analyzing your situation, developing problem-solving skills can increase your chance of survival. Now, during this disastrous summer, the government expanded its weather collection data. Almost 24 weather stations were tracking the weather 3 times a day, sending regular reports to Washington, hoping that scientists could learn more about this odd occurrence. However, not unlike today, while citizens worry about their livelihood, Congress voted to double their own incomes. Of course. While, like other politicians who ignored the struggles of their constituents, were not voted back into office, hoping to rely on the government to come to your rescue is a fool's errand. At best, as you can take from this, it's obvious, who had the best interest at hand for the citizens, right on? There was no FEMA in 1816. That would have alleviated at least some of the suffering. Back then, most people had the mindset to prepare and save for a rainy day, but for farmers, having no summer was more devastating than they could ever have prepared for. Nowadays, very few Americans have that mindset, and many, unfortunately, realize no one is coming to their aid in a worst case scenario. It's best to assume that the government won't be able to come and take care of you. FEMA asks citizens to prepare with at least, 3 days worth of food. Someone had told me once before, I think it was last year, someone had said now it's 7 days worth of food and water and supplies stored up for an emergency. But even this measure is woefully inadequate. It could take at least that long for government just to arrive to help. So therefore, be wise, take responsibility for yourself and for your family by being prepared. Learn about the possible risks in your area and prepare for them. Store enough food and water and money to help you survive financial hardships and natural man-made disasters. FEMA has information about the hazards near you and your home and how to prepare for them, but I wouldn't rely on that. Right on? So, could Mount Tambora erupt again and cause no summer? Well, the odds of another Mount Tambora are pretty slim according to scientists, yet other events can cause a shortage of food and unusual weather, okay? And there are many active volcanoes that would cause very similar results, affecting an entire hemisphere if they erupted. If. Okay? Keyword if. So, volcanic eruptions can alter weather in other ways, too. January 2022. Hung Tona Hunga. Can't pronounce the last word. Haapai volcano. It erupted. The release of 58,000 Olympic-sized pools into our atmosphere potentially increased the water vapor in the stratosphere by 5%. It has been theorized that the water vapor has more impact on raising temperatures than other factors because it absorbs both incoming and outgoing radiation. So learn from those who lived through the Mount Tambora and that year without a summer, and apply those lessons to your survival plans. So one last question. How would you survive if there was no summer? Meaning, can't have a garden because nothing is going to last, okay? How would you prep for something like this, okay? All right, guys, I'm out of here. I will see you in the next one, okay? You stay safe, you stay positive, you keep prepping, and as always, fearless. Ciao.